Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The day had started like any other at Forrester Creations, the bright California sun spilling across the modern glass and steel architecture, the office buzzing with the usual hum of designers, assistants, and the occasional delivery man who navigated the hallways like a minor character in a grand theatrical production. But nothing in the mundane rhythm of daily life could have prepared anyone, least of all Eric and Ridge, for the shock that was about to strike them like lightning through the family's already tangled web of love, betrayal, and ambition. Thomas had returned, and not just in some fleeting cameo or a brief business visit, but in full force, his presence like a hurricane swirling through the meticulously organized lives of the Forresters, carrying with him a combination of charm, scheming intensity, and that uncanny knack for showing up exactly when tension was at its peak. The news of his return spread faster than wildfire, whispered in corridors, shouted across open office spaces, and even causing Poppy to nearly drop her coffee. As she recounted the sighting of him striding purposefully through the lobby, his designer suit perfectly tailored, his expression a mixture of determination and that unmistakable smirk that had always meant trouble in the most deliciously dramatic sense. Eric, sitting in his office overlooking the city, phone in hand after receiving a frantic call from Ridge, found himself frozen in disbelief, the papers on his mahogany desk suddenly irrelevant, the skyline of Los Angeles blurring as the implications of this return unfolded in his mind. Ridge, equally stunned, had a hard time reconciling what he was hearing with the reality in front of him, pacing the office with that familiar restless energy, hands ruffling his hair, eyes darting to the door. As if Thomas might magically appear there at any second, because knowing Thomas as he did, it was entirely possible that he would. And then there was Stephanie, whose own return had been shrouded in mystery and whispered speculation. She appeared not as a fading memory of the matriarch who had once dominated every Forrester gathering with equal parts wit, wisdom, and formidable willpower, but as a force reborn, her presence commanding, sharp eyes scanning the room, her voice carrying that signature mix of warmth and steel that made everyone from Eric to the newest intern take notice, as if to remind them all that despite time and circumstances, Stephanie Forrester was still a storm that could not be ignored. The moment these two entered the Forrester world once again, chaos began to ripple outward, subtle at first. A rearranged chair here, a whispered conversation there, a barely perceptible flinch from hope as she realized she would have to navigate not just the return of Thomas, whose past decisions had left emotional scars deeper than any wound visible, but also the return of Stephanie, whose mere presence could recalibrate loyalties, stir old rivalries, and challenge the very foundation of every carefully laid plan in the company and the family. Eric and Ridge were left staring at each other in stunned silence, disbelief etched into their faces, both thinking the same unspoken thought. This can't be real. It simply cannot be, because every fiber of their experience had taught them that once Thomas and Stephanie were involved, nothing would remain simple, calm, or predictable, and yet here they were, standing in the foyer of the Forrester mansion, the sunlight bouncing off the polished floors and glinting in the designer furnishings. Two people who had been presumed distant, if not gone entirely, returning with a weight of history that seemed to press down on the shoulders of everyone present. Thomas's gaze met Ridge's, and for a fleeting second, there was a mixture of challenge and apology, a silent acknowledgement that the past was messy, that relationships had been tested, and that the future would now be rewritten, whether anyone wanted it to be or not, while Stephanie's eyes softened as they lingered on Eric, a subtle smile tugging at her lips, as if she knew she had just shifted the axis of his world in ways that were both terrifying and exhilarating. Conversations began immediately, urgent and overlapping, with Brooke attempting to mediate, her voice trembling slightly as she balanced the shock, the excitement, and the underlying fear of what these returns meant for her already complicated position in the family. Hope hovered nearby, caught between disbelief and curiosity, trying to reconcile her own feelings about Thomas, who had once been a source of both betrayal and love, and Stephanie, whose opinions had often carried the final word on matters that were both personal and professional, creating an undercurrent of tension that left Hope emotionally raw, vulnerable, and unable to focus on anything other than the seismic shifts happening in real time. Meanwhile, Liam paced the hallway outside, cell phone clutched tightly, replaying the call from Ridge over and over, each repetition driving home the reality that the people he had thought absent, removed from their lives, or safely distant were now here in Los Angeles, with intentions that no one could yet fully read, and that fact alone made every decision, every plan, every carefully calculated move suddenly feel fragile and insufficient, because Thomas and Stephanie didn't just return. They returned with the capacity to disrupt, to manipulate, to heal, or to wound, depending on how events unfolded, and who was willing to listen, compromise, or stand their ground. As the hours stretched, the conversations expanded into strategy, reflection, and confrontation, with Eric asserting the need for clarity, Ridge seeking reassurance from Brooke and Taylor that the family's business, reputation, and emotional equilibrium would survive this unexpected storm, while Thomas and Stephanie, with subtle smiles and knowing glances, seemed to operate on a plane slightly removed from the panic, as if they had orchestrated this return for maximum impact, understanding that the mere presence of the two of them would ignite questions, reveal secrets, and force the Forresters to confront unresolved conflicts that had simmered quietly, sometimes painfully, for years. Even the younger generation, Steffi, Kelly, and Phoebe, felt the tremors of this return, each grappling with emotions that ranged from excitement to resentment to confusion, because Thomas's past actions had left marks that could not simply be erased, and Stephanie's influence, often understated but always decisive, promised to reshape family dynamics in ways that made everyone suddenly reconsider loyalties, trust, and the future of the Forrester empire. By the evening, the mansion had taken on a charged, almost electric atmosphere, the tension coiling around conversations like invisible threads, unspoken accusations and tentative alliances forming simultaneously, with the occasional laugh or joke breaking through as a temporary relief, but never lasting more than a moment before another revelation, another glance, another subtle maneuver reminded everyone that the rules of the game had shifted irrevocably. Eric, sitting back in his chair, eyes scanning the room as Thomas engaged Ridge in a tense but oddly familiar exchange, could only marvel at how unpredictable life could be, how the return of two people thought distant or removed could cascade into a torrent of emotion, decision, and reaction that left every member of the Forrester family both exhilarated and terrified, while Ridge, his mind racing with past regrets, current challenges, and future possibilities, realized that navigating this new reality would require a combination of patience, cunning, and the kind of resilience only forged through years of triumphs and heartbreaks. As night fell, the city lights of Los Angeles twinkled beyond the mansion windows, indifferent to the human drama unfolding within, and yet every conversation, every glance, every subtle shift in demeanor carried the weight of history, the promise of reconciliation, or the risk of disaster, because in the world of the Forresters, as Eric and Ridge now painfully, thrillingly realized, nothing returned simply. Everything came back with consequences, and Thomas and Stephanie, alive, present, and fully engaged, were proof that the past was never truly gone, that the family would always be tested, and that sometimes the most unbelievable realities, the ones that make you exclaim, "This can't be real," are precisely the ones that change everything in ways no one can predict, plan for, or control. The mansion settled into an uneasy quiet after the initial shock, but anyone who truly knew the Forresters understood that peace was always temporary. The very walls seemed to hum with anticipation, as though they themselves were waiting to see what chaos and revelations would unfold next. Thomas, leaning casually against the grand staircase, allowed his eyes to roam the room, observing reactions with a mix of amusement and calculation, as if reading an intricate map of emotions, loyalties, and unspoken fears. He could sense Ridge's tension like a living thing, feel the subtle adjustments in Eric's posture, and hear the faint tightening in Hope's voice as she tried to stay composed, yet failed, betraying that inner storm of conflicting emotions. Thomas had always been able to walk into a room and command attention without a word. And now, reunited with Stephanie, the dynamic was even more potent, a perfect storm brewing within the Forrester walls, one that promised both confrontation and revelation. Stephanie, meanwhile, carried herself with that inimitable aura of authority and charm. She smiled warmly at Eric, who nodded slowly, trying to reconcile the decades of memories with the present reality, but her eyes betrayed an unspoken message. Nothing about this reunion would be simple, nothing would be forgiven or forgotten without examination, and everything, every conversation, every decision, every glance, would be weighed against a history only she fully remembered. The two of them together, Thomas and Stephanie, created a gravitational pull that drew every family member, every employee, and even the most casual visitor into a tense orbit, each person feeling the weight of what had returned and what it might mean. Brooke moved closer to Ridge, placing a hand on his arm, feeling the vibrations of anxiety and disbelief run through him like electricity. "Ridge, I know this is shocking," she murmured, "but we have to stay calm. We can't let the past dictate the future." Ridge looked at her with eyes that reflected years of struggle, and a deep well of hope mingled with fear. "I know, Brooke, but Thomas, Stephanie, they weren't supposed to be here. This changes everything, Brooke. Everything." He ran a hand through his hair again, pacing slightly, and the air seemed to vibrate with tension, a tangible sense of the fragile equilibrium that had been so carefully constructed now teetering on the brink of collapse. Even Taylor, standing near the couch, tried to offer reassurance, though her own nerves betrayed her. "Ridge, Thomas is our son," she said softly. "Stephanie, she's our anchor. Maybe their return is exactly what we need, even if it doesn't feel that way yet." Her words were comforting, but they did little to ease the knot of anxiety in Ridge's chest. The idea that things could suddenly align perfectly in the Forrester universe felt almost laughable, yet a small stubborn part of him dared to hope it might. Meanwhile, Thomas had begun engaging directly with Hope, whose expression was caught somewhere between anger, confusion, and longing. Their conversation, polite on the surface but electric beneath, revealed all the layers of their history, the flirtations, the betrayals, the moments of vulnerability that neither of them could fully forget. Thomas's voice was measured, almost hypnotic in its calm intensity, drawing Hope into a mental dance of anticipation and wariness. "Hope, I know this is unexpected," he began, "but I'm here now, and I think we can face what's been left unfinished." Hope's eyes narrowed slightly, the well-practiced wall of composure she always carried threatening to crumble. "Thomas, you have no idea what's at stake now," she replied, "or what your return might mean for all of us. I don't even know if I can trust you anymore." The tension in her voice was palpable, and yet, there was an undeniable flicker of curiosity, the spark of unresolved feelings that had never fully dissipated, proving that the past, no matter how messy, had a persistent way of inserting itself into the present. As the conversation unfolded, Eric couldn't help but notice the subtle, unspoken communication between Thomas and Stephanie. They moved in sync, like a duo who had spent years anticipating each other's reactions, finishing sentences that weren't spoken aloud, exchanging glances that conveyed more than words could express. Eric's mind raced, considering the implications not just for the family, but for Forrester Creations itself. The business had always thrived on innovation, competition, and occasionally ruthless strategy, and now with two powerful minds returning, it was as if the very core of the company would be tested in ways it hadn't been for decades. He felt the pressure of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. As patriarch, it was his duty to navigate this turbulent influx of energy without losing control, without allowing old wounds and unresolved conflicts to derail the company or destroy the fragile balance of personal relationships he had fought so hard to maintain. Liam, standing just outside the main room, wrestled with his own emotional storm. He had never imagined Thomas and Stephanie back together in his life at the same time, and the dual presence felt overwhelming. He replayed past arguments, past misunderstandings, moments of love and pain that now collided with the stark reality of their return. Every step he took toward the room felt like wading through quicksand. He knew he had to engage, had to protect Hope and the children, had to navigate this renewed familial chaos, but the sheer intensity of emotions left him temporarily paralyzed. When Thomas caught his eye, there was a fleeting recognition, an acknowledgement of the shared history that bound them inextricably. Yet Liam remained wary, aware of the unpredictable patterns that had always defined Thomas's presence in their lives. Steffi, not far away, watched silently, her mind a whirlwind of calculation and emotion. Thomas's return brought with it not just emotional upheaval, but also potential shifts in power and influence within the family and the company. She noted how he interacted with Stephanie, how Ridge reacted, and how Hope's vulnerability seemed to deepen under his gaze. Her instincts told her that the next few days would demand careful observation, strategic patience, and subtle maneuvering, because in a family like the Forresters, every glance, every word, and every action carried multiple layers of meaning, each with the potential to trigger reactions that could either heal or devastate. Kelly and Phoebe, too, felt the tremors of change. Even at their young ages, they sensed the underlying currents, the invisible tensions that now flowed more freely in the mansion than they had in years, and their innocent curiosity mingled with apprehension as they tried to make sense of the adults' complicated interactions. Meanwhile, the conversation between Stephanie and Eric deepened, turning toward the practical, the unspoken, and the emotionally charged. Stephanie, ever perceptive, could see the worry etched into Eric's face, could feel the weight of responsibility pressing him down, and she addressed it directly, her tone firm yet compassionate. "Eric, you've carried this family through storms before," she said. "Thomas's return, mine. It's another storm, yes, but you don't have to face it alone. We're here now, all of us, and we have to decide what this means together." Eric nodded slowly, appreciating the reminder and the support, yet the gravity of the situation remained undeniable. It wasn't just the personal drama. The business, the legacy, the future of Forrester Creations hung delicately in the balance, and every decision would reverberate through both family and company in ways that could not yet be predicted. As night deepened, the mansion became a stage for private conversations and small confrontations. Taylor and Brooke found themselves in whispered discussion, weighing the potential outcomes of Thomas and Stephanie's presence, while Hope sought solace with Liam, confiding fears and frustrations that she had struggled to articulate all day. The complex web of relationships stretched taut, each connection vibrating with tension, expectation, and the possibility of revelation. Thomas, aware of the strategic advantage his presence offered, began to gently probe, asking questions, planting ideas, and subtly reminding everyone that history had taught him lessons in patience, manipulation, and timing, all of which he intended to use to shape the unfolding narrative. Stephanie, walking the halls with her characteristic grace and authority, encountered Steffi and Kelly, who hesitated but eventually approached her, sensing the warmth beneath the steel. Stephanie smiled, her eyes crinkling with a mixture of affection and wisdom, and in that moment, she reminded everyone that despite the chaos, there was stability in experience, guidance in the past, and strength in understanding the intricate layers of family dynamics. "Children," she said softly, "change is never easy, but it's always honest. You'll see that in time. Trust your instincts, but also trust that we're here to guide, not just to control." By the early hours of the morning, the mansion was quieter but no less charged. The family had begun tentative steps toward reconnection, the first gestures of negotiation, apology, and dialogue that hinted at the possibility of healing. Eric and Ridge, exhausted but resolute, sat together briefly, reflecting on the extraordinary day. "I can't believe this is real," Ridge admitted, voice low. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and it's just a dream." Eric chuckled softly, though it was tinged with the weight of responsibility. "Dreams can be dangerous, Ridge, especially when they involve family. But maybe, just maybe, this is the reality we need to face together." Outside, Los Angeles stretched beneath a dark, starlit sky, the city unaware of the drama unfolding in the mansion on its quiet hill. Inside, every glance, every whisper, every sigh carried significance. The return of Thomas and Stephanie had altered the course of lives, reshaped strategies, and reopened old wounds while offering the fragile promise of reconciliation. And though disbelief lingered in the minds of Eric, Ridge, Hope, and countless others, one undeniable truth remained. The Forresters would never be the same again, and the next chapter, unpredictable and charged with emotion, was only just beginning. By mid-morning, the mansion had begun to stir with a tense, anticipatory energy, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Conversations that had started the night before continued in hushed tones, some tentative, some pointed, all heavy with unspoken history. Thomas moved through the rooms with that practiced ease, his presence a constant reminder that the past could never truly be left behind. Every glance he exchanged with Ridge, every careful word spoken to Hope, hinted at layers of intention and emotion that only he fully understood, while Stephanie, calm and measured, observed the interactions with the quiet authority of someone who had lived through decades of family triumphs and disasters. Eric, meanwhile, paced the study, phone in hand, trying to balance his role as patriarch, CEO, and peacemaker, feeling the weight of every choice pressing down on him. Hope lingered near the staircase, catching fragments of conversations, her mind racing with questions, doubts, and flashes of memory. Thomas's past betrayals, Stephanie's stern guidance, and the unsettling truth that their return could shift everything she thought she understood about love, loyalty, and family. Ridge approached her cautiously, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Hope, I know it's a lot to take in, but we'll figure this out together," he said, though even he struggled to sound convincing. Across the room, Liam watched silently, heart pounding, aware that every move, every word, could ignite tension or open the door to reconciliation. As the day unfolded, small gestures began to emerge. A nod, a tentative smile, a shared glance that suggested unspoken understanding. The Forresters were navigating the delicate electric space between disbelief and hope, chaos and connection, realizing that the return of Thomas and Stephanie was more than just a shock. It was an opportunity, a challenge, and a reminder that in this family, nothing was ever simple, and everything was deeply, beautifully, unpredictably real.